Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Jim Miller, and the FlipSide starts right now. Hi, welcome to the show. Tonight we're here with Barry Jackson, the election director of the Washington County Board of Elections. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's jump right in. I mean, we are in election season, but we're always in election season, Jim.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. The next one will start the day after the general elections, or at least for the candidates that are hoping to.
Absolutely. But as we'll learn, Barry and his folks have a defined amount of time to do their work, and we want to learn more about that tonight. But Barry, starting us out, for the viewers that may not be familiar with the Board of Elections, what is the mission of the Washington County Board of Elections?
Well, we actually have a mission statement that's on our website, so I will try to say it from memory. The people in Washington County, as citizens in a democracy, will have the protection of their fundamental rights, the right to vote and have that vote counted. And so what does that mean? Well, some of the things that we do to make sure that that happens is we have to comply with federal, state, and local election laws. We provide easy access to voter registration. We conduct fair, secure, and transparent elections and encourage citizen awareness and participation in the election process. And then we utilize community resources like the FlipSide for voter education.
Excellent.
So what are the primary responsibilities your office handles, both outside of an election cycle and then, of course, now that we're in an election cycle?
Yeah, and I appreciate that you all said that there's never not an election, right? It's always election season.
Right.
Because, you know, we feel the same way. And just to prove that point, you know, we had the last general election we had was in 2024. By the time we had certified it and done a manual audit of that election, really the manual audit was the last thing we did to put that election to bed. We did that in January of 2026, and then in January of 2025, and then in February of 2025 was candidacy filing was opening for the 2026 election.
Yeah.
So literally, we're always working on an election. And so that was kind of the kickoff of the 2026 election cycle. And then throughout 2025, in addition to taking candidacy filings, we also you know, constantly are doing voter registration and list maintenance. That's, you know, 5 days a week, you know, 365 days a year. And so we work on that. We also would have meetings with the State Board of Elections, as well as other local boards of elections around the state through our professional organization, which is called the Maryland Association of Election Officials. So we would have regular meetings just to talk about how did 2024 go, what should we be doing to get ready for 2026. Those are the things we kind of do. And also, we do voter registration distributor training. So there are folks who like to go out and help us get voter registrations. We have a specific training that we do for them to make sure that they can take the registrations properly, make sure that they're filled out correctly. So we do that throughout the year. We also go to school and community organizations to do demonstrations and presentations. So those are the kind of things that we would do throughout the non-election year, right? But also, and we do take our vacations, you know, because it is a little bit more laid back, so that is the time that we take some time off. But then in February of 2026 was when candidacy filing ended, and that's what really kind of got the clock going, right? So once candidacy filing ends, then the State Board of Elections starts working on the ballots that we have to produce. And so the next thing we do is we'll proof those ballots. And in Washington County, we had 141 ballot styles. And the reason for that is because in a primary election, you have a Republican ballot, you have a Democratic ballot, and then we actually had an affiliate, a nonpartisan ballot, because there were enough candidates for Board of Ed that allowed there to be a nonpartisan ballot with the Board of Ed on it. And so that's 3 ballots right there, but then we have 47 precincts. So 3 times 47 is 141. So we had 141 ballot styles that we had to prove and make sure that every one of them is correct. Ballot names or the candidate names were spelled correctly, punctuation was correct, just all the things, you know, that make the ballot correct. So we had to do that, and then once we finished that, of course, then the state board started producing the ballots and getting them sent out for mail-in ballots. But in the meantime, we started training our election judges, and we do 40 classes. We do, because there's 600 election judges we got to train, so there's 40 classes. They're morning, afternoon, evening, and even on Saturdays. So we were doing that. And then the ballots started getting delivered. We had our 141 ballot styles delivered to the headquarters, where we had to verify that they were correct and then start distributing them for early voting, election day, and then, of course, if people wanted to vote by mail, but they could come into our office and actually get a ballot. So we had those ballots ready for folks like that. And then mail-in ballots were sent out first to the overseas voters, and then to our domestic voters. And then as soon as they were sent out, then our ballot drop boxes were delivered by the state. We have 8 of them around the county. And once our ballot drop boxes are delivered, then we have to have people coming out and emptying them and bringing them back to the election center with the ballots that are in them.
And what is the timing for that,
So
for primary?
mail-in ballots are sent out about 45 days before election day.
And do you do that, or does the state do that?
The state does that through a shipper. So it's a printing company
Right.
That they contract.
The one that had a problem this time.
I'll have more on that later.
Okay. I figured you would.
So anyway, so it's about 45 days before election day. And so, within a couple of days after the ballots are mailed out, then we start to see them coming in from the voters. They mark them and they send them back. And so that's when we start the process of emptying the drop boxes. And we have 2 teams, 2 bipartisan teams, one on the east side of the county, one on the west side, that handles, the drop boxes. And they bring them back every day. And that's 7 days a week. So we have to have somebody in the office every day of the week now, getting the ballots delivered by our Dropbox people. And so after that, then we start doing a logic and accuracy testing of our voting equipment. And what that is just basically running our voting equipment through its paces to make sure that it's ready for election day and for early voting. We start with the ballot marking devices and the scanning units for early voting. Once we finish those, because that's the first that we need to use them is for early voting.
Right.
Then we go to our election day precinct scanners and ballot marking devices, and that's hundreds of pieces of equipment. So that takes several weeks.
Is there a different piece of equipment for the primary than there is for the general in some cases?
There is not.
Okay.
Yeah, we use the same equipment, but we will have to test it again.
Okay,
for
so
the general.
you're just testing twice. That makes sense.
Yep. So we have, once they came back to us from all the election day polling places, we have what we call post-election maintenance, where we check them to make sure that they're okay, they hadn't been damaged or whatever. And then once that's completed, then we'll do our logic and accuracy testing all over again. And so that's happening, and that actually goes into early voting. So now early voting has started, and we're still testing equipment. And while that's happening, we start doing our mail-in ballot canvasses. Because in Maryland, we are allowed to start counting mail-in ballots to get ahead of it.
Right.
'Cause in Washington County, we'll have 10 to 12,000 mail-in ballots.
Really?
That'll come back. And so, if we have to wait until after election day to count those, we're not going to be done in time to certify. So the state General Assembly did allow, and we're a smaller county. I mean, imagine Montgomery County with hundreds of thousands of ballots, and PG County, and so they did allow everyone in the state to start counting early. So we'll do that. We'll have early voting going on, and then we'll do another canvass after early voting finishes and before election day starts. And then on Saturday before election day, our chief judges come and they pick up their election judge supplies. That hasn't already been delivered to the polling place. So we're talking about like the poll books. They pick up the poll books, they pick up their forms folder, all of the different bags that they have to have, those kind of things, and signs that go out. So they'll pick those up on Saturday before election day. And then of course we have election day, which is, like our Super Bowl, right? Yeah. Except that after election day is over, we're still not done, right? Because we still have a mail-in ballot canvass the 2 days after election day. And then the following week, we have our provisional ballot canvass, and we'll talk more about provisional ballots in a minute. But and then finally, 10 days after Election Day, we certify the election, but we're still not done because the General Assembly last year passed a law that requires every local board of election to do what's called a risk limiting audit of the election, and it's picking ballots at random to do a hand count. And so we have bipartisan teams that will do a hand count of the ballots that were selected to make sure that the scanning units that scanned them were accurate, all right? So we did ours for the primary election in July, and it was 100%.
So let me understand that. So is there a ballot number that you look at and you say, for this ballot number, the machine should have captured RD, 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 and then you look at the machine and it says RD, 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 you're good?
Yeah, not exactly. What the state, and in fact, and then the state is the folks that tell us what we're supposed to count. So it was a whole thing. So Jared DeMarinis, our state administrator, went on YouTube, and he had to roll this die. It was like a 12-sided die or something, you know, like something you'd see in a casino or something, I don't know. And he had to roll this die and come up with these sequences of numbers. And I don't understand how all that worked. That was all background stuff. But once he got these sequences of numbers, then somehow they ran this equation and said, okay, Washington County, based on the dice roll
The random dice roll.
yeah, you're going to have to now count scanning unit 1 from the first mail-in ballot canvas, and you're going to have to count the scanning unit from Sharpsburg Elementary School, you know, precinct 1, and you know, so on and so forth, right?
So you actually do a whole.
We had to do the whole
Wow.
box full of ballots.
Wow.
Which helps because we know what the count was for that box. You know what I mean? So once we count them, we have to match it up with what the scanning unit count was.
But it's completely random.
It is. What's random is what was selected for us to count.
Right. No, I understand.
Yep.
And when do you know what is selected for you to count? Before or after the election?
It's after the election.
Okay. So there's no cheating.
No, not at all.
Wow.
Not at all. And usually we have a couple of days. Once they've told us, we have a couple of days to get ready for that and go ahead and do it. And so we did ours, and it took us less than an hour, and we had a little less than 1,000 ballots to count, you know, between all of the places that we needed to count, and came up 100%.
So when you get a mail-in ballot, how do you record that? Do you run it through a machine?
When our mail-in ballots come in, we do have a sorting machine that we run it through just to check it in. And then, and what it'll do for us, it'll sort it, and this is more important than the primary election, it'll sort it by party, and it'll sort it by legislative district. So we make sure that we have all of the ballots for, you know, the Republican ballots for District 1C, you know, all together, and so on and so forth. And then once we've done that, then we go to our voter registration system, which is more of a manual process, and we'll check in with a barcode scanner each of those ballots, and it creates a batch that we'll then set apart, rubber band it, and then when it's time for the mail-in ballot canvas, we'll say, okay, here's batch number 123, you know, and it's the Republican ballots for District 1C, you know, that kind of a thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Barry, we're going to take a quick break here, but I'm just loving the details in regards to the process and all that is involved in your operation of our never-ending election cycles. So thanks for what you're sharing. Stay with us. We will have more of the flip side after the break. Welcome back to the show. We're still joined by Barry Jackson, Election Director of the Washington County Board of Elections. Barry, I'm working my way through that now after a few attempts at it. But Barry, thank you for staying with us. I think the education that you're giving us is that it is a very detailed process to pull off an election, to give the citizens what they deserve. And not only that, you know, we've joked all the time on the show that election cycles are never ending, and it is true. Not just in regards to what we see on, you know, mainstream television, but behind the scenes, you are always working in one part of the process or another. Mm-hmm. Whether it's auditing and finishing off one, and then there's the start of the next one that starts right up after that. So Thank you for that. But Jim, jump right back in on this.
Yeah. So first of all, and I agree with you, what they deserve. But I think the other question is, or the other statement is, what they are guaranteed by our Constitution.
Yeah.
I mean, this is at the very basis of who we are as a nation. So 140, 150,000 people in Washington County, some subset of those are registered voters. We've talked in the thousands about mail-in ballots, and I'm sure a lot of, however many absentee ballots or, and then the voting day and the early voting. What kind of staff does it take to maintain this? How many people do you have employed?
I would say not enough. But we do have, we have 9, which is actually much more than we had in years past. I would like to get a 10.
I'm sorry, 09 or
No.
90?
9.
Okay.
When I started in 2016, I was the 5th person in the office.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're up to 9. So
Okay.
we're happy about that. I would love to get a 10th. I'd like to have an administrative assistant.
Yeah.
The county budget and finance hasn't agreed with me so far, but anyway, yeah. So we have 9 staff. Now, of course, there's no way 9 staff is going to run an election, without our election judges.
Really?
Yeah. We have 40 polling places around the county, so yeah, we need our election judges.
Okay, so you have 9 people. So talk about the election judges and what that looks like when they come into play. And when do they come into play?
So we have, it's interesting. So the election judges, we usually start around October of the prior year. So like 2025, we started contacting people who worked in 2024 and said, okay, hopefully you'll be an election judge again. And we send out the notice for them to apply, because they do have to apply every election. And interestingly enough, we have I don't want to say a contract, but it's a term of service.
Right.
So election judges have a term of service, which is 2 years, but it always starts before a primary election and ends before the next primary election, right?
Right.
So, but what's good about that, though, is what if we were to have a special election? Then we could press them into service.
Right.
Hey, you're still an election judge.
Right.
So we need you to come back out of retirement, right, and be an election judge for the special election. So yeah, it's a 2-year term of service, and we contact them around October of the year prior to the election, so that hopefully by the beginning of the next year we have a good idea of who's coming back, and then we know who do we need to add. So there's always a little bit of turnover every election, and there's always a core group of people that come back every election, and we love those guys and look forward to seeing them again. So we start training about 2 months before Election Day.
And that would be the primary election?
Yes, and we do have a training in the general as well, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, the training in the primary, we try to start it as close to Election Day as we can, but there's other things that we have to do, like we have the LNA testing, we have early voting coming up, obviously, so we have to make sure that the training is done within a certain amount of time. And but we do try to do it as close to Election Day as possible, because you don't want to get trained on something 2 months before Election Day and you've forgotten it all,
Right.
by Election Day. So, but we'll start then, and it's a combination of lecture and hands-on training. It's usually 3 to 4 hours, depending on the position that you hold, and so they'll learn about the basics of being an election judge first off the bat, and then we'll start talking about their specific jobs, and then actually give them a chance to practice on the equipment. Toward the end of the class. And we have, chief judges who are the managers in the polling place. We have provisional judges who are responsible for processing provisional ballots, which is a process all in of itself. I mean, that is a very difficult position. And our provisional judges also do same-day registration. So folks who are not registered can come to early voting, they can come to their Election Day polling place, and they can register to vote if they're not already registered, as long as they're pre-qualified to register. So in other words, the state is aware of these people. They're qualified to be registered, but they're not registered, right? So they can come and get registered at their home precinct. They wouldn't be able to register at another precinct. They would have to be in their home one. Or they could do it at early voting, at any early voting site. Anyway, so our provisional judges handle that. And then we have our check-in judges who are at the poll books, and they check the voters in. And they also hand out the ballots to the voters when they get checked in. And our voting judges meet the voters once they've gotten their ballot, and either direct them to a voting booth, or they may want to use the ballot marking device. They'll direct them to the ballot marking device. And our voting judges will also be staffing the scanning units, because we always have to have someone at the scanning unit. Obviously, that's where the votes are counted, and we got to make sure that that's monitored at all times. And so that's what our voting judges do. And we have a ballot marking device judge who helps voters mark their ballots on the ballot marking device. It's a pretty intuitive device, but sometimes folks do need a little help. There are some things, for instance, if you get to a contest that has more names on it than will fit on the screen, then there's a flashing more button at the bottom. And if the voter makes all their selections on that first screen, they can't advance to the next contest until they hit more, So there's things like that we try to make sure that the voters are aware of, because they get frustrated, if they don't know that. What other judges do we have? Well, we have technical judges who are there in case there's any issues with the voting equipment. They're kind of the first line of defense, to see what they can do to troubleshoot it. And if they can't figure it out, they'll call us at the office and we'll walk them through some things. And we have greeter judges. The greeter judges are at the front of the polling place, and they'll make sure that when a voter's coming, they're either there to vote, or maybe they're dropping off a mail-in ballot, because we have mail-in ballot bags that they can drop their mail-in ballot in. Or they might be there to register to vote. So the greeter judges will just try to ascertain, so that they can kind of keep the line moving efficiently,
Make sure nobody's electioneering.
Well, that too. They keep an eye out for that as well. Yeah. So, so those are our election judges. And then in the general election, we have what we call refresher training, because they just got trained in the primary. And a lot of the election judges are like, why do I have to go through training again? Well, it's required by law, right? So what we do is we try to make it beneficial to them. It's not going to be another, lecture and hands-on. What we do is, and I'm not sure that anybody else in the state does this. I think Washington County is the only ones that do this. We do what we call a mock polling place. And so we have all of the election judges come, well, not all. We have a group of 40 election judges that will come, but it's all of the different jobs, right? Like it would be at a polling place. And they come, and we have all their equipment there like it'd be a polling place. All of their forms are there, everything they need, just like it's election day. And then we tell them, go, right? So it's up to them to set up the polling place. It's up to them to get ready for election day. It's up to them to actually run the election on election day. And so we'll have, like, I'll be a voter. I'll come in and I'll get checked in and get a ballot and mark my ballot. And so we do that during the refresher training. And they really enjoy that, because they feel like they're practicing. It's not like sitting there and listening to me talk for 3 hours, So they get a chance to hands-on and remember, okay, what did we do in the primary? And it also gives us an opportunity to watch how they do things, at the polling place. And it's fun to watch. Sometimes we'll see them do some things. I'm like, I don't remember telling you to do that, So, and then we get a chance to correct them and say, okay, well, I saw you did this, but you really
wanna do
wanna
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay. So they enjoy it and we enjoy it. And so we do that again because it is required that they have a training again before the general.
So I have just 2 follow-ups. Sorry, Reggie. He's going to yell at me later about stealing all the time. The training happens every election cycle. Mm-hmm. So if I've been a judge for 20 years, new election cycle, I'm still going to go through training. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. And there's primary training, and then there's this follow-up training for just before the general. Tell me, aside from, you talk about, you have a staff of 9. We've heard about these weekends that you have to go out and get ballots 7 days a week. Do your paid employees do all of that, or are election judges involved other than on election day?
Yeah, for the ballot drop boxes, we have a group of of people who are signed up just to do drop boxes. And the drop boxes, for whatever reason, are required to have background checks done.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so whereas our election judges aren't. So, but I don't want to say that out loud because now it's it's out there in the public, but because I don't want to have them all get background checks. But anyway, so yeah, there's a process for someone to become a ballot drop box, judge, I guess. And so we have people that are identified for that. Now there are times, as always happens, people can't make it, and so our staff will backfill. And the teams are bipartisan teams, And so we always make sure that whatever staff member is helping is, the opposite party of who is
Nice.
there, yeah. But mostly our staff is in the office waiting for the teams to come back because we have to check in all those ballots. It can't be the same people, so
Right.
one person goes and gets them and then another person checks them in. So, and we have bipartisan teams that check them in as well.
And my last follow-up is those ballot boxes, once they're in the office, what is the security around those ballots? Because, I mean, they could come in months in advance, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have a room, it's our mail-in ballot room that's secured. And that's, as soon as they get checked in, they get put into whatever bin they're supposed to be put in, right? Because we have, how are we gonna receive mail-in ballots? We can receive it through the mail. Some people could drop it off in our office, or they get picked up at the drop boxes. So we have different bins, because we have to keep track of how they came back. So we have an in-person bin, we have a mail bin, we have a drop box bin. And so they get put in there, and then they wait to be sorted through our sorting machine, and then checked in through MD Voters. And so they're always in a secure room. And once we grab them and get them checked in, they go back in the room again.
Right.
And then we start putting them in we have blue ballot bins. They're hard plastic ballot bins. Once we've got them checked in, they're in their batches and they're ready to be counted, they go in that blue ballot bin, and they're not touched again until they go to the canvas to get counted. So they stay in that secure ballot room.
I left you 47 seconds. Right?
Barry, you see what he did to me there? But and Barry, the question I'll ask you before we take a break is, you've talked about you do have a little bit of turnover each year. How do residents become election judges, or if they have that interest, how do they get involved?
The best way to do it is to go on our website. Our website is WashingtonCountyMDVotes.gov. And there's one of the top tabs up there at the top of the homepage says Election Judges. And if you click on it, there's two buttons. One says Log In, and one says Apply. So if you're already an election judge, you can log in, and then you have your own portal.
Right.
But if you're not, you click Apply, and it goes right to that application.
Excellent, because we want to keep the pipeline full for you,
Absolutely.
so that you can meet your mission. All right, well, stay with us. We'll stay with us, and we'll have more of the flip side after the break. Welcome back to the show. We're still joined by Barry Jackson, the election director of the Washington County Board of Elections. Barry, you have been giving us a lot of amazing information, how involved the process is to make sure that we have free and fair elections, and just all the coordination between, your staff of 9 and the election judges and volunteers. And
Does that blow your mind, Reg?
yeah, I mean, come on, Barry doesn't have an admin?
Believe me, somebody needs to keep me straight. that's for
Yeah,
sure.
listen, I'm going to be the next person to go in front of the county commissioners and cause a fuss. Like, we got to find some money in the budget for Barry. Like, what are we doing here?
Well, definitely a note to self: don't consider the election board as a retirement option, because you'd be working 80 hours a week.
Yeah, but Barry still has all his hair in it, so he's faring pretty good in this.
Most of it.
But Jim, I'm going to be nice to you tonight, and I'm going to allow you to jump right back in.
Okay. Well, we did finish a primary. Tell me how that worked.
How'd the primary go?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all things considered, I thought it went really well. Ever since 2020, we've seemed to have something going on, with our election. Of course, we had the pandemic in 2020. In 2022, we had redistricting that kind of threw a monkey wrench in everything. I don't remember what happened to 24, but I'm sure there was a problem there. But anyway, 22 was fairly smooth, except for one thing, and that was we had this mail-in ballot error.
26.
26, what did I say? 26, the primary, there was a mail-in ballot error that the printer that the state had contracted with, who's located in Minnesota, had sent ballots, and they sent the wrong party ballot to some voters. Now, and their explanation of that was there was a quality control step that was missed. And so that's how they weren't sure how many voters had gotten the wrong party ballot. In Washington County, I'm only aware of 4, and that was 4 who called us to say, hey, I got the wrong party ballot, right?
Right.
If that were it, that we could have handled that easily. You know, we could have gotten them the right party ballot, no problem, you know, but, you know, statewide, we did not know how many this affected. And so the state administrator made the call that day to say, you know what, we're just going to avoid every single ballot that's been sent, and we're going to send new ballots out. And he sent
To everyone.
To everyone. And so he sent one of his staff members to that facility in Minnesota to oversee it, to make sure it was done properly.
Wow.
Right, yeah. He was on top of it. And now, because of that, though, we had received back ballots already, the original ballots. So we had what we call the original ballots, and then we had replacement ballots, right? So the originals were the ones that were sent originally and to the voters.
But they were null and void at that point.
That's correct. And so we voided all of the original ballots, and so only the replacement ballots were going to count. But we had to keep track of the original ballots, and when a replacement ballot came in for that same voter that sent an original ballot, we had to pull that original ballot out and set it aside, right? And then keep the other originals that hadn't gotten a replacement ballot sent back. And so by the end of the election, once we were to a point where we'd counted all the mail-in ballots, all the replacement mail-in ballots that we got in, there were still these original ballots left that were the only ballots that voters had sent in. They didn't send the replacements in.
So you lost voters.
Well, state law allows for us to, if they've only sent one ballot in, we can count that ballot. And so we were able to count those original ballots because we were able to verify. And so my staff, they invented on the fly a process to keep track of, you know, they created a spreadsheet, and every single day as we got ballots in, they checked off, okay, here's a replacement, here's the original. And so we knew exactly how many original ballots we had that had not gotten a replacement ballot. So we were ready. You know, when we finished counting all the replacement ballots, we knew here's the exact amount of original ballots that have been sent in that did not get a replacement ballot by that same voter. And so we were able to count those ballots. And that was true across the state. And that is a stipulation in election law. So as long as that's the only ballot, it's the only legitimate ballot that was sent in, right? So they were originally voided, right? But then once no other ballot was sent in, we were able to basically, not unvoid them, but we were able to check them back in again as a ballot, right? And so having said all that, and again, it went very well, and all things considered, I thought it was a very smooth election. But when you think about it, there was a problem that was created that was not of our own making,
Right.
that caused a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
You know, because every single day, 7 days a week, we had to check, you know, to make sure, and you know, and it took, you know, hours, you know, every day to make sure that each of these ballots, you know, were straight, and you know, we had pulled the originals that had replacements, kept the others aside, you know, and we had to do that every day.
Well, I knew that it was being fixed, if only by the fact that the news cycle on it dried up very quickly. So I don't know what they did for, you know, for public information, but clearly they did what they needed to do because, as you know, there's going to be certain media outlets that would jump on that and stay on it forever.
Yeah.
So the fact that the coverage dried up led me to believe that something was going right.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, you know, how big was the problem? We'll never know.
Right.
You know, but at the time, Jared Demarinis, our state administrator, he made the right call. Yeah. You know, because we didn't know. And, you know, it could have been tens of thousands, or it could have been hundreds. You know, who knows, around the state. But he said, you know what, we're just going to avoid them all and send replacements out. And it worked out. You know, all of the local boards around the state all kept track of it very well, and yeah, so everything worked out great.
Turnout wasn't good this time?
No, not quite as good, but it actually wasn't as bad as I thought when I look back at some of the older numbers. Let me see if I can find some numbers for you. So in 2022, we had 29.69% turnout in the primary. In 26, we had 21%. Now, that sounds like a lot less, but the caveat to that is in 2022, there was not a nonpartisan ballot. So we had 20-some thousand voters that weren't included in the eligible voter list because there was only a Republican ballot and a Democratic ballot. So basically, the eligible voters in 2022 was like 74,000. In 2026, it was 103,000. So 21% of 103,000 is about the same as 29% of 74,000, right? So it actually, when you look at it, the turnout was pretty about the same. And then in 2018, we were back to 21%, so which also was about 100,000 voters. So I think we were kind of steady now that I look back at it. But I will say this, early voting turnout was crazy. I mean, we were 50% higher than in 2022 for early voting. And it's interesting because, you know, when we started day one, it didn't seem busy. You know, it seemed kind of slow. And I thought, yeah, that's a shame. You know, we're not going to have, you know, a lot of voters for this. But then when we looked at the numbers, yeah, day one, we were already 50% higher than we were in 2022. So overall, you know, I'm actually pleased with the early voting turnout.
Great.
Yeah.
Does the primary give you any indication ever of what the general may look like, or those are two totally separate animals?
They are and they're not. So, you know, generally, when you look at a gubernatorial election, the primary turnout is anywhere from 20 to 25%, and the general turnout is anywhere from, you know, 45 to 50%, right? Presidentials, it's usually about 40 to 50% in the primary, 70 to 80% in the, you know, in the general.
Gotcha.
And so if I look at this and I see that we have 21% turnout in the primary, I can probably expect we'll be somewhere around 45 to 50% in the general.
Yeah. You, Jim.
Oh, okay.
I'm being nice tonight.
From a, how have voter expectations changed regarding convenience and access to voting?
You know, it's interesting. When I look back at, you know, so we have three different ways you can vote, right? We've got mail-in ballots, you've got early voting, you got election day. And throughout the years, and I've been doing this since 2008, you kind of see the same people in the same kind of election. You know, so the people I see at early voting in 2022, I tend to see again in 24, and I get to see in 26. You know, same thing with election day. Same people kind of show up on election day. And of course, with mail-in voting, you know, we have the permanent mail-in ballot list. And so most of our mail-in ballot voters in Washington County are on that list. So they're going to get a mail-in ballot every election, you know, so they're always going to vote the same way. But, you know, before 2010, you know, my first election was 2008. You had election day, and that was it. You know, you came to election day, and if, you know, you could vote an absentee ballot if you weren't going to be in town for election day, that kind of thing. But typically our absentee ballots were in the hundreds, you know. Now, you've got early voting, you've got thousands of people coming to early voting, you've got mail-in ballots, thousands of people voting mail-in ballots, sometimes 10 to 12,000, you know, depending on the election. And then, of course, you know, and election day is still the most popular way to vote. That's still, most people vote on election day. But obviously, since 2020, the mail-in ballots have gotten much more popular. And I think early voting is kind of held steady.
So from a pure numbers perspective, when you say 45 to 50%, how many voters is that?
So we have a little over 103,000 registered voters in Washington County.
Okay.
So you're looking at, you know, basically 45
So 45
to
to
50,000.
50,000 that'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that'll be spread out, you know, between mail-in ballots, early voting, election day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Did the primary results tell you anything in regards to the length of time that you are foreseeing that it's going to take to call some of these races?
You know, that's a great question. I really don't know. And I'll tell you, again, you know, gubernatorial elections don't have a large turnout, which I think is a shame because the gubernatorial elections are all of the local races.
Yes.
I would think people would care more about that.
And that's and that's one of the things it's the opposite, right? 'Cause
Right.
you're getting what 25% more turnout when it is the national races.
Yeah.
So
And and I know it's because people are watching television and all they see is the presidential race,
Yeah.
and so people get more interested in that. I understand that, but we had very tight races in the primary for a couple of races. I think the commissioner's race is going to be very interesting.
yes, yes.
Obviously I'm not a prognosticator. I just run elections.
No, no,
but-
no. Leave that to leave that to me. Jim has had to leave that to me as well. But
But yeah,
I've lost more steak dinners betting him on elections than I care to think
Is
about.
that right?
Oh, yeah.
and he's losing more this season.
No, I'm not. This is going to be Jim's year to turn around.
So yeah, I would hope that people will get really interested in these
Yeah.
local races for the general election.
Yeah. All right, excellent. We're going to take one more break. We're going to come back and dig in a little bit more before we let you out of here. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
All right. Stay with us, and we'll have more of the flip side after the break. Welcome back to the show. Barry Jackson is still with us, giving us wonderful information about him and his staff and the volunteers and all the wonderful work that they do. Jim, I've been kind to you tonight. I am coming back to you so
Wow.
you can lead this last segment off.
So, cybersecurity concerns are growing every day. How have they influenced election preparation, election administration, and the things that you do on a daily basis?
I think that we in Maryland have kind of got ahead of that. Even before cybersecurity was, in the forefront, back in 2016 when we had our new voting equipment, we already were thinking about that, right? So our scanning units, when they're manufactured, they actually have the ability to have network connections. We ordered them without that, right? So there's no modems and then there's no network connections in the scanning units. Same thing with the ballot marking devices. And so there's no way to fiddle with the equipment unless you're physically there, at the equipment. And so there's no cybersecurity concern there when it comes to the voting
There's
equipment.
no Bluetooth.
No, there's no Bluetooth. There's nothing that can connect it to anything.
Okay.
It's just a standalone piece of equipment. And our poll books, again, they're only networked to one another at the polling place. And the reason we do that is so that if somebody checks in at this poll book, they can't check in over here at this poll book, right, and get two ballots. So, so when somebody checks in here, all of the poll books are connected to one another, so they know, they all show the same people that have checked in. So we do have a hub, I guess you'd call it a hub, that they're all connected into, but that hub doesn't go out anywhere. It's just a local hub so that they can all communicate with one another. So they're not connected to anything. As far as our election systems that we have, so of course we have a voter registration database that we're connected to the state, and every local board of elections is as well. It's a secure, dedicated T1 line, so it's not over the internet, anything like that. Not on the cloud.
Private circuit.
Yeah, it is a private circuit, and so we use that same network as well when we do our election night returns on election night. So that's uploaded to the state and it goes straight through to them. So, so yeah, I feel like in Maryland we're in pretty good shape when it comes to that.
So you talked earlier about the fact that there are, I guess, USB drives or thumb drives that you carry the results around on. I assume that that's a download that's not capturing direct to the thumb drive. So talk about the data integrity. If something would happen to that thumb drive, you get it back to the office and you can't read it.
That's a great question. And so yes, we do have a contingency for that, and we've had to use it before. Yes, so if the thumb drive comes back from the polling place and we go to upload it and there's a problem that can't be remedied, what we would do is we also have the paper ballots. So the paper ballots come back in a blue ballot bin, And so what we would do on that night is we would rescan those ballots
Wow.
onto a new memory stick. And we've had to do that once. We've had to do that once. And I'm not sure what caused the memory stick to get corrupted. You know.
Technology.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that they pulled it out before they turned off the machine and it got short-circuited. Who knows what happened. But it's not a disaster,
Right.
because we can fix that. And so that's what we did. We had two bipartisan folks on our staff, rescanned the ballots, and then uploaded the file. So it just basically, it took the amount of time to scan hundreds of ballots before we could get that precinct uploaded again. So.
You talked earlier about the random audit that the state implemented. What other audit procedures or security procedures have been implemented in recent years?
So we have quite a number of different audits that we do throughout the year. We have what we call a voter registration oversight audit, which is kind of interesting. Each of the local boards, so we're split up into small LBEs, medium-sized LBEs.
What's
and
an LBE?
Local Board of Elections.
Okay.
And then large. And we're considered a medium size, even though we're one of the smaller of the medium-sized ones. And so every month, each local board of election of that particular size is assigned another local board to audit.
Oh.
And so we actually have to go on their voter registration, because we can see other counties' voter registration lists, and run different things. Like we have to audit how many voters have been added to the rolls, how many were canceled, how many changed parties, how many were taken off because of death, how many are taken off because of being felons, things like that. So there's different things that we look at, and we review them to make sure that they did them properly. And so if we find one that we think was not done, then we'll make a note of it and we send that to the state board. And then that LBE will get a report from the state board based on and same with us. We'll get a report, So that's one of the audits we do. We do that throughout the year. We do it once a month, every month throughout the year. Just to
Are
make
your
sure.
audit results public information?
That is a great question. I would say no, but I could completely be wrong. No one's ever asked for them, and we don't provide them.
Because I know that, in election years and I'm not saying in our community, but, there's always concern about deceased being on the rolls or different things like that. But
Right.
obviously, if you have audit and there's, you can dispel that if that was ever in our community. I just didn't know if that
True.
information is.
I will say that,
public-facing.
the reports that we file, at least the spreadsheets that we create, has personally identifiable information on them. So for the voters.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that would be publicly available or not. But that's one that we do. The state has what they call a comprehensive audit that's done at every election. So primary election, general election, every election cycle. And that is, they make sure that every local board of election is completing their processes, the election processes properly. So they'll ask us for forms that our election judges filled out at the polling place. They'll want to make sure they are filled out completely. They'll look for, deadlines. Did we meet certain deadlines? So it's a long list. It's like a 13-page audit that they do with all these different things that they're looking for. So that's another audit that we do. And then, of course, we have the risk limiting audit
Right.
that we do with the ballots.
Okay. Reg?
Excellent. Earlier, you talked about election day voting still dominates kind of the numbers or the percentage of the voters. What's number two? Is it early voting or is it mail-in voting?
It is mail-in voting. Yeah.
Okay. Is that percentage growing, the mail-in?
I think it started to level off a little bit.
I mean, obviously, right after COVID,
Yeah,
in that period of time,
that
it was
really spiked, yeah.
right.
So that's kind of leveled off, as well as I think early voting has gotten more consistent as far as the turnout goes. But yes, mail-in ballots are a little more than the early voting turnout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And around that, are there any notable trends? I mean, I hear you saying something in regards to kind of the early voting. You're saying that is that leveled off as well, or is that still growing?
Yeah, I think generally it has, but again, as I mentioned earlier, I was very pleasantly surprised.
Because you had an early indication you didn't think that it was.
Right. And then we ended up, by the end of early voting, we were 50% higher than in 2022. Now, hopefully what that means is in 2022, we only had 2 early voting sites. In 26, we had 4.
So access has helped.
That's right.
increase that.
So hopefully what that means is more people are taking advantage of these early voting sites. We did have a new one this year, which was Clear Spring, American Legion. We'd never had one out in the western part of the county, and I think it's important to have one out there. And so that was the least attended, but again, it was the very first time.
Right.
Same thing with the Washington County Free Library in Hagerstown. The first time we did that, very
Numbers
few
were
voters
low.
went there. Much more people went again this year. We were back there this year.
Right.
More people went. So I think it's just like anything, people get used to it and it tends to grow. So we're going to keep coming out to Clear Spring and see how it goes.
Excellent. Are you looking at any more early sites?
Well, we're required to have 3 because of the amount of registered voters we have in the county. We're allowed to have an additional one with the approval of the county commissioners and the State Board of Elections. So 4 is basically our max.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Jim.
So you mentioned earlier all of the different ways that people could register to vote if they're not registered, up to and including same day. Talk to me, you mentioned they need to be, so two things. Number one, what of those has been implemented recently? And number 2, if I want to be a register at the poll, what does that process look like in terms of the state giving me the thumbs up to do that?
Right. So really, same-day registration, it's been around for a few election cycles now, but that is the newest real addition to voter registration. Pretty much everything else is kind of the same. Federal law dictates the voter registration application, for
Right.
instance. So there's really not much we can do to make changes to that. But when it comes to same-day registration, so if you wanted to register at either early voting or at your polling place. Number one, if it is at your polling place on election day, you got to make sure you're at the polling place you should be at, right? It should be your neighborhood polling place, because our poll books have a database of people who are qualified to register, and that's why if someone shows up and they're in the poll book, then they can get registered, right?
And how do you get on that list of people that are qualified to
So
register?
mostly it comes from the Motor Vehicle Administration. So there are people who have a valid driver's license, but for whatever reason never registered to vote. Even though really if you go to motor vehicles now, I
They're
mean, you
gonna
almost
ask you if-
automatically get registered, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But there are people that are out there who have driver's licenses and they're not registered to vote, so they can get registered. And so the best way to do that, if you want to get registered, is to bring your driver's license. We have a handheld barcode scanner that we can actually scan the barcode on the back of the driver's license, and all that information should pop up on the poll book, all right? So all we would need to do, as long as the address is correct in the poll book that matches what's on the driver's license, we would just need to ask them what political party they want to be, because that's the only thing we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And once they've told us that, we can select it then, and then we'll print off an oath, because on the voter registration application, there's an oath at the bottom. So since we're doing same-day registration electronically, we would have to print that oath off, and so they would sign
would
the oath.
sign it,
Yep.
right.
And once they've done that, now they're registered to vote, and they can now get a ballot. So we're going to check them in just like any other registered voter in the polling place, and they can go get a ballot. Now there are times when it doesn't quite work that way, right? So for whatever reason, maybe their address is not correct in the poll book, or the address on the driver's license isn't the same as where they live, then that gets into a kind of murky area, right? So we're not able to issue them a regular ballot. We're going to have to issue them a provisional ballot until we can verify the information that they've given us.
But they still get to theoretically vote. It's just a question of if you can verify it, it's counted. If you can't, it's not.
That's correct. So we still register them,
Right.
but then they have to vote a provisional ballot instead of a regular ballot. Yeah.
Barry, that's all the time we have for tonight, but thank you for this really intensive look at what you do, in front of the public, but also behind the public. And I think, if anything, our viewers can say they should have a lot of confidence in our voting systems here in Washington County.
Well, and in Maryland, frankly, I mean that whole ballot mix-up really.
Absolutely.
That
And
was impressive the way that was.
And the
handled, in my
decisive
view.
decision making to say, nope, we're gonna
Yep.
get that and move forward. So, thank you for all your short but mighty staff, all you guys accomplished, and your volunteers. So thank you for all you do, and we'll have some election night coverage where we'll get to see you again and talk about things then.
Yeah, bring me back then. I'll be glad to come.
Well, that's all the time that we have for tonight. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on X, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. But more importantly, join us again next week for another episode of Flipside.